The echoes of distant gunfire rolled across the hills surrounding Fort Bragg as Maya Johnson stood motionless in the armory. Her hands, calloused from years of meticulous weapon maintenance, froze mid-motion on the disassembled M4 carbine. Through the open window, she counted each report, 4 shooters approximately 1,500 meters away. Barrett M82A1s firing in sequence. One shooter compensating poorly for a 12 mpr crosswind. Most people heard only noise. Maya heard stories written in gunpowder and lead. At 29, Maya had perfected the art of invisibility within the sprawling military complex. 5 years maintaining weapons for America's most elite fighting forces had taught her that anonymity was sanctuary. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her government-issue uniform always precisely pressed, her words few, and measured everything calculated to fade into the background of the base's daily rhythm. No one at Fort Bragg knew that weapons had been her first language taught by a father whose name still echoed in whispered legends among special operations veterans. Few suspected that the quiet armory technician could field strip and reassemble any weapon system in the arsenal with her eyes closed, or that she could read the wind by watching how dust settled on concrete. Maya returned to her work, fingers moving with practiced precision through the familiar ritual of cleaning and reassembly. The walls of the armory held enough firepower to wage a small war, but Maya found peace among the locked racks and secured cabinets. Here, weapons were honest. Unlike people, they only did what they were designed to do without deception or hidden agendas. A faded photograph was tucked inside the small toolkit she carried, its edges worn from years of handling. Master Sergeant David "Ghost" Johnson smiled back at her. His weathered face, caught in a rare moment of unguarded joy during a fishing trip 3 years before cancer claimed him. Before the secrets and warnings, before the promise she had made beside his hospital bed. The memory surfaced with unexpected clarity. She was 12 years old, standing in the vast emptiness of the family's property in rural Montana. The weight of her father's Remington 700 felt impossibly heavy in her small hands. The target, a steel plate, stood 300 yards away, shimmering in the summer heat. "Breathe with the earth, Maya." Her father's voice was gentle but insistent. "Feel its rotation. The planet is spinning at over 1,000 miles an hour, yet you don't fall off. That's the relationship you need with your rifle. Become one system." She remembered the confusion on her young face, the frustrated tears threatening to spill. "Why do I need to learn this, Dad? None of the other kids at school have to shoot rifles." David Johnson had knelt then, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter, his hands steady enough to take impossible shots that had saved countless American lives in conflicts few civilians knew existed, rested on her shoulders. "Not to take life, sweetheart. To protect those who can't protect themselves. The skill itself is neither good nor evil. It's the heart behind it that matters." The memory dissolved as the armory door swung open, bringing Maya sharply back to the present. Captain Logan Reed entered the room with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding attention. At 35, Reed carried himself with the hardened confidence that came from 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. His Green Beret qualification badge gleamed on his chest, alongside rows of ribbons that told stories of valor under fire. Reed's reputation as one of Fort Bragg's premier snipers preceded him, particularly his confirmed kill at 2,500 meters during an operation that remained classified. The shot had become something of a legend, whispered about in the mess halls and barracks, with equal parts awe and skepticism. Reed carried an M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, cradling it with the familiar ease of a parent holding a child. Maya recognized the weapon immediately, the Army's replacement for the older M24 system, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, capable of consistent accuracy at ranges exceeding 200 meters in the right hands. "I need this fixed by tomorrow," Reed said without preamble, placing the rifle on Maya's workbench. "Something's off with the scope. Shots are drifting right at distance." Maya nodded, maintaining the professional detachment that had served her well. "I'll look it over, sir. What distances are you experiencing the drift?" "Started noticing at 800 meters, gets worse as distance increases." Reed's tone carried the subtle condescension of a combat veteran addressing support personnel. "Just recalibrate the scope. Should be simple enough." Maya nodded again, keeping her eyes down as her fingers moved with practiced efficiency over the weapon. She checked the torque on the scope mounts first, a common culprit for accuracy issues, finding them correctly set. The barrel showed no signs of damage or excessive wear. As Maya methodically worked through possible issues, her trained eye caught something subtle in the scope's adjustment settings. She frowned slightly, turning the elevation turret with careful precision. "Your minute of angle adjustment is off by 0.3 mils, she said quietly, almost to herself. "And the Coriolis compensation is set for the Northern Hemisphere when we're—" "Wait, were you deployed recently, sir?" Reed's expression shifted from impatience to sharp attention. "Afghanistan, 3 weeks ago. How did you know?" Maya hesitated, realizing too late that she'd revealed more knowledge than a weapons maintenance technician should reasonably possess. The MOA adjustments were standard enough, but few outside elite sniper circles understood Coriolis effect compensation, how the rotation of the Earth itself affected bullet trajectory differently depending on which hemisphere you fired in. "The settings," she answered carefully. "They're configured for Southern Hemisphere shooting. Common mistake after deployment rotations." Reed's eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. "Most armorers wouldn't catch that. Hell, most snipers don't understand Coriolis compensation at that level." His voice hardened. "Who exactly are you, Johnson?" Maya kept her expression neutral, while internally cursing her carelessness. 5 years of careful anonymity compromised by a moment of professional pride. "Just doing my job, sir. I've worked on a lot of sniper systems." Reed moved closer, his frame imposing in the confined space. "No, Coriolis effect calculations are taught in Week 6 of Advanced Sniper School, not basic armorer training. You also mentioned mills instead of MOA, that's sniper terminology, not armorer speak." Maya met his gaze with practiced calm. "My father was a marksman. I picked up some terminology growing up." "A marksman," Reed repeated, his tone making clear he didn't believe the understatement. "And who was your father?" Before Maya could answer, the door opened again. Master Sergeant Daniel Martinez entered the armory with the unhurried confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove to anyone. At 45, Martinez carried the weathered dignity of a career Marine who had transitioned to Army Special Operations training. His face bore the subtle marks of a life spent in harsh environments. Desert sun lines around his eyes, a thin scar along his jawline from shrapnel that had nearly taken his life during an operation in Fallujah. "Reed Paitu," Martinez acknowledged with a nod. "Bothering our best armorer." "Our armorer here was just explaining how she knows advanced sniper ballistics." Reed responded, his suspicion undiminished. Martinez's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes as he looked more carefully at Maya. "Johnson's one of our best technicians. If she spotted something on your rifle, I'd listen." The tension hung in the air for a moment before Reed backed down, retrieving his weapon from the bench. "Have it ready by 0600 tomorrow. We've got qualification runs." After Reed departed, Martinez lingered, studying Maya with a gaze that seemed to peel back layers. You know I've been watching you work for almost 2 years now. His voice was calm, conversational. Never seen anyone handle weapons with such intuitive understanding, almost like you were born to it. Maya busied herself with organizing her tools. Just experience, Sergeant. Experience. Martinez echoed the word, hanging between them. You know, you remind me of someone I served with years ago. Same hands, same way of seeing things that most people miss. He paused. Johnson's a common name. Any relation to a David Johnson Master Sergeant, 5th Special Forces Group, later attached to classified JSOC operations? Maya's heart stuttered, but her hands remained steady, a skill her father had taught her before she could drive. He was my father. Martinez nodded slowly, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. Ghost Johnson, one of the finest shooters who ever lived. He studied her face. He never mentioned having a daughter during his service. He kept his family separate from his work, Maya replied, the familiar defense ready on her lips. That he did, Martinez agreed. Your secret's safe with me, Maya. But Reed won't let this go. He's got the kind of ego that can't stand mysteries, especially ones that challenge his expertise. After Martinez left, Maya leaned heavily against the workbench, a rare moment of vulnerability in her carefully constructed fortress of calm. She had been careless, letting professional pride override the caution her father had drilled into her. The memory of his warning resurfaced with painful clarity. There are people who will want to use what I've taught you, Maya. People who see skills like ours as weapons to be aimed, not human beings with conscience and choice. Stay invisible. Stay safe. But invisibility had just become much harder to maintain. The setting sun cast long shadows across the modest apartment complex where Maya lived on the outskirts of Fayetteville. Her one-bedroom unit was Spartan by civilian standards, neat, functional, devoid of personal touches, except for a small collection of photographs on the living room wall. Most showed landscapes, the Montana mountains where she had grown up, the deserts of the American Southwest, where her father had taught her to read the wind. Only one photograph showed people Maya at 16, with her father beside a sun-dappled lake, both holding fishing rods, their smiles unguarded, in a rare moment of simple joy. It had been taken 3 years before the cancer diagnosis that would ultimately claim him, before the strange visits from men in unmarked government vehicles, before the hushed conversations behind closed doors. Maya had just finished her evening routine, a 5-mile run, followed by dinner and maintenance of her personal go-bag, a habit inherited from her father, when a sharp knock cut through the quiet apartment. She tensed years of trained vigilance, sending her hand automatically to the secured drawer where she kept her personal Glock 19. Through the peephole, she saw Captain Reed standing in the hallway, still in uniform despite the late hour. His posture radiated restrained tension. Maya hesitated, then unlocked the door, but left the security chain engaged. Captain Reed, it's 2130 hours. Reed's expression was hard, determined. We need to talk Johnson, not through a chained door. This isn't appropriate, sir. Whatever concerns you have about your weapon can be addressed tomorrow at the armory. This isn't about the weapon. It's about who you really are and what you're doing at Fort Bragg. Reed's voice lowered. I've spent the afternoon making calls, looking into your background. Your credentials check out on paper, but there are inconsistencies. 5 years at one of America's most sensitive military installations, with a background that's suspiciously thin before that. Maya's mind raced through options. Direct confrontation would only escalate the situation. Denial would fuel his suspicions. Sir, with respect, this conversation should happen through official channels. Reed leaned closer to the door. I've served 3 combat tours protecting this country. If there's a security breach on my base, I need to know." The accusation hung in the air like a live grenade. Before Maya could respond, a familiar voice spoke from the shadowed hallway behind Reed. "That's enough, Captain." Master Sergeant Martinez stepped into view, his presence immediately altering the dynamic. Reed straightened instinctively, responding to the senior NCO despite his officer rank. "With respect, Sergeant, this is a security matter. A matter you're pursuing off-duty out of uniform in spirit, if not in fact at the private residence of a civilian contractor." Martinez's tone remained conversational, but carried an unmistakable edge of authority. "That doesn't look like proper procedure to me." Reed's jaw tightened, but the rebuke found its mark. Military protocol was sacred ground. "Ms. Johnson isn't who she claims to be," Reed insisted, though with less certainty. Martinez regarded him steadily. "I knew her father, Captain. Served with him. David Johnson was a patriot who gave everything for this country, including, eventually, his life. His daughter has earned more right to be here than most of us." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Reed looked back at Maya with new eyes reassessing. "Ghost Johnson was your father, the ghost." Maya neither confirmed nor denied, maintaining the controlled silence her father had taught her when uncertain. Martinez filled the void. "Captain Reed, I suggest you return to base and pursue any legitimate concerns through appropriate channels tomorrow, after you've had time to consider the implications of harassing the daughter of one of the most decorated special operations veterans in modern American history." After Reed's reluctant departure, Martinez remained in the hallway. Maya closed the door to remove the security chain, then reopened it. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I served with your father in places that don't exist on maps, doing things that never happened according to official records." Martinez's weathered face softened slightly. "He saved my life twice. Supporting his daughter seems like the least I can do." Maya hesitated, then stepped back from the door in silent invitation. Martinez entered, his eyes automatically scanning the apartment with the ingrained habit of a man who had survived by assessing environments. "Your father was more than just another sniper," Martinez said, settling into the room's only armchair. "He could do things with a rifle that defied explanation, shots that should have been mathematically impossible." Maya remained standing, arms crossed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Reed's interest has opened a door better left closed. He won't stop digging." Martinez leaned forward. "And because I saw you handling weapons in the armory. You move like your father. Same instincts. Same understanding of ballistics that goes beyond training." Maya felt the weight of a decision point, a moment her father had prepared her for, but hoped would never come. "What do you want from me, Sergeant?" "Nothing, but Reed needs to be convinced you're not a security threat." Martinez met her eyes directly. "One demonstration of your skills would satisfy his suspicions. Show him who you really are under controlled circumstances, and he'll back off." "I don't shoot anymore," Maya said flatly. "I made a promise." "To your father," Martinez nodded. "I figured as much. But consider this. Which would David prefer, you breaking a promise, once under controlled conditions, or having Reed launch an investigation that could expose everything your father wanted to keep hidden?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable yet demanding resolution. Maya turned to look at the photograph of her father on the wall, seeking guidance from a ghost. "One demonstration," she finally said. "Tomorrow morning, before the range gets busy. Just you, me, and Reed. Then it's done." "Agreed." Martinez stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "Your father was the best I ever saw. But from what I've observed of you, I wonder if you might be better." After Martinez left, Maya moved to her bedroom closet. Behind a false panel lay a small, fireproof safe. Inside was a leather-bound journal filled with her father's handwritten ballistic calculations formulas that went far beyond standard military sniper training. Equations accounting for variables most shooters didn't know existed. She traced her fingers over his neat, precise handwriting, remembering the long hours he had spent teaching her these principles, not as abstract mathematics, but as the language of wind and gravity, distance and time. The memory came unbidden her father in his hospital bed, his once powerful frame diminished by cancer, his eyes still sharp with urgent purpose, his hand now trembling where it had once been steady enough to take impossible shots, gripping hers with surprising strength. "Promise me, Maya. Promise you won't use what I've taught you. Not for them, not for anyone. They'll come for you eventually, just like they came for me. They'll offer you purpose, resources, a chance to serve. But they won't tell you everything. They never do." "Who, Dad? Who will come? Men who think skills like ours belong to them. Men who see people like us as weapons, not as humans with conscience and choice." His grip had tightened. "Promise me you'll stay invisible." "I promise, Dad." The memory faded, leaving Maya alone with a decision that would irrevocably alter the careful life she had built. She closed the journal, returning it to its hiding place. Whatever happened tomorrow, the days of invisibility were ending. Dawn at Fort Bragg painted the sky in watercolor shades of crimson and gold as Maya walked toward the isolated section of the range Martinez had arranged for their demonstration. The morning air carried the familiar scent of pine and dew-dampened earth, stirring memories of early mornings in Montana, her father teaching her to read the subtle signs of wind direction from grass movement and cloud patterns. She wore her usual work uniform, practical, unremarkable, but carried herself differently now. No longer attempting to fade into the background, she moved with the natural fluid grace of a predator. It was a subtle shift, but to trained observers like Martinez, who waited at the range with Reed, it would speak volumes. The range Martinez had chosen was secluded, used primarily for special operations training rather than regular Army qualifications. Targets were positioned at various distances from standard 100-meter marks out to more challenging 800-meter positions. Basic for snipers, but far beyond typical marksman requirements. Reed stood with arms crossed, his expression guarded but curious. Beside him, Martinez maintained a careful neutrality. "Ms. Johnson," Reed acknowledged as she approached. The Ms., rather than her first name, established professional distance, but the absence of hostility suggested Martinez had been persuasive overnight. Maya nodded in greeting, her eyes already assessing conditions: light crosswind from the northeast, approximately 3 to 5 mar. Humidity higher than yesterday, which would affect bullet drop over distance. Temperature cool but rising, which would change barrel harmonics as the morning progressed. "I've agreed to one demonstration," she said simply. "After that, we all return to our duties, and this matter is closed." Reed's jaw tightened slightly at her tone, civilian to officer, but he nodded. "Fair enough." Martinez gestured to a table where 3 rifles were laid out: a standard-issue M4 carbine, an M110 semi-automatic sniper system, and Reed's own M2010 bolt-action from yesterday. "Your choice," Martinez said. Maya approached the table, her hands moving over each weapon with practiced familiarity. She selected the M2010, the most challenging of the 3, and the one Reed himself used. The message was clear. "Distance?" she asked, checking the rifle's action with smooth efficiency. "Let's start at 300 meters." Reed suggested, the subtle emphasis on start, revealing his skepticism about her abilities. Maya nodded, accepting a magazine from Martinez, and loading the rifle with a fluid motion that spoke of thousands of repetitions. She moved to the firing position, a simple mat on the ground, and settled into a textbook prone position, though with subtle adjustments that reflected personal technique rather than military doctrine. Through the scope, she acquired the 300-meter target, a standard silhouette, and made minute adjustments to the scope settings. Without urgency, she established her breathing rhythm, feeling the connection between heartbeat and trigger pressure that her father had taught her before she was old enough to drive. The first shot broke the morning stillness, the rifle's report echoing across the range. Through the scope, Maya saw the bullet impact dead center in the target's head area. Without comment, she worked the bolt, chambering another round. 4 more shots followed in measured sequence. Each one struck within a half-inch group consistency that would be exceptional for most qualified snipers. Reed said nothing, but his posture had changed, the crossed arms now less defensive, more contemplative. 500 meters, Martinez directed, moving them forward without discussion. Maya adjusted her position slightly, recalculating for the increased distance. Wind had picked up marginally now, 5 to 7 miles. She compensated intuitively, feeling rather than intellectually processing the mathematics. 5 shots in rapid succession, each finding the center mass of the target with unwavering precision. 800. Reed said, his voice revealing nothing. Maya made more substantial adjustments now. At this distance, variables multiplied, wind drift became more significant, the bullet's ballistic arc more pronounced. She took slightly longer to settle, connecting with the weapon in that peculiar way her father had described, becoming part of the same system, feeling the Earth's rotation beneath her. 5 shots. 5 perfect impacts, grouped so tightly they formed a single ragged hole in the center of the target. Reed's expression had transformed completely, professional skepticism replaced by undisguised admiration. That's exceptional shooting. Maya rose from the prone position with the same economical grace that characterized all her movements. Are we done? Not quite. Martinez interjected, his tone carefully neutral. Captain Reed, would you place a target at your discretion, somewhere challenging? Reed hesitated only briefly before nodding. He moved to the range controls, adjusting settings. In the distance, a motorized target system activated, positioning a silhouette at 1,000 meters, twice the distance most military marksmen qualified at, and near the effective limit for the rifle in most hands. 1,000 meters, Reed announced, a hint of challenge returning to his voice. 1 shot. Maya returned to the firing position without comment. This range approached genuine sniper territory, where mathematics and intuition intersected, where factors invisible to untrained observers became crucial. The wind had shifted slightly now, coming at a quartering angle. Temperature had risen enough to affect barrel harmonics. She took longer this time, settling into that space of perfect connection her father had taught her, the place where breathing slowed, where heartbeats stretched, where the invisible dance of physics and biology aligned into a perfect moment of possibility. The shot, when it came, seemed almost anticlimactic after such focused preparation. The rifle's report echoed across the range. Through the scope, Maya watched the bullet strike precisely where she had intended, splitting the small aiming circle at the center of the target's head. Rising from the mat, Maya handed the rifle to a visibly stunned Reed. As agreed, 1 demonstration. Reed accepted the weapon automatically, his expression transformed. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Even with your father's instruction, that kind of skill takes a lifetime, Maya finished for him. Yes, it does. She turned to Martinez. Are we done, Sergeant? Martinez nodded slowly, a strange mixture of admiration and concern in his weathered features. We're done. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. As Maya turned to leave, Reed found his voice again. Wait, that wasn't just good shooting. That was I've never seen anyone shoot like that outside Tier 1 operators. The way you read the wind, the consistency at distance. He struggled to articulate what he had witnessed. It's not just technique. It's something else. Maya paused, weighing her response carefully. My father called it seeing through the bullet's eyes. Understanding that you're not sending a projectile downrange, you're extending your will through time and space. She met his gaze directly. Captain Reed, I've fulfilled my part of our agreement. Now I expect you to fulfill yours. Reed nodded, professional respect evident in his bearing. No more questions. You have my word. As Maya walked away, the morning sun warming her shoulders, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at having navigated a dangerous situation, pride in honoring her father's teaching. But beneath these, a growing unease, a sense that a door long closed was beginning to open. She didn't see Martinez watching her departure with troubled eyes, or notice when he pulled out his secure phone once she was out of sight. Nor did she hear his quiet words to someone on the other end of the connection. Sir, you need to contact Colonel Coleman immediately. It's about David Johnson's daughter. She has her father's gift. Maybe more. Colonel James Coleman sat alone in his office at Fort Bragg headquarters, the afternoon sun slanting through Venetian blinds to cast prison bar shadows across his desk. At 60, Coleman carried his age with the dignified resilience of a career soldier. His posture still parade ground, perfect, his eyes sharp beneath silver brows. 3 decades in Special Forces had left their mark in the network of fine scars on his hands, and the permanent vigilance in his gaze. Before him lay a folder he had not opened in 5 years, retrieved from a secure safe in his office wall. The red classified stamp across its cover had faded slightly with age, but the code name remained clearly visible: Ghost Protocol. Martinez's call had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. David Johnson's daughter here at Fort Bragg, not just present, but demonstrating the same uncanny abilities that had made her father a legend in circles so secretive that most of the military didn't know they existed. Coleman's hand rested on the folder, reluctant to disturb the ghosts contained within. His relationship with David Johnson had been complicated, part commanding officer, part friend, part conspirator in the end. They had served together in operations that official history would never record in places where America officially had no presence. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Sir, Master Sergeant Martinez is here. Send him in." Martinez entered with the quiet efficiency that had made him valuable in special operations, a man who moved through the world, leaving minimal wake. He came to attention briefly before Coleman waved him to a seat. "Tell me exactly what you saw," Coleman said without preamble. Martinez chose his words carefully. "She shoots like her father. Better, maybe. The same connection to the weapon. The same intuitive understanding of ballistics. At 1,000 meters, she placed a shot that would challenge our best snipers, and she did it like she was posting a letter." Coleman nodded slowly. "And you're certain Reed is satisfied?" For now, he was more impressed than suspicious by the end. "But, sir, if she's anything like her father, others will notice eventually." Coleman opened the folder at last, revealing photographs, after-action reports, and data charts that documented the career of Master Sergeant David "Ghost" Johnson. One photograph showed a younger Coleman standing beside Johnson in unmarked fatigues, both men squinting against desert sun mountains of Afghanistan rising in the background. Between them stood a third man in civilian clothes, thin, scholarly, with the intense focus of a scientist rather than a soldier. David Johnson wasn't just an exceptional shooter, Martinez. He was part of something called Project Athena. Began in the late Cold War, continued under different names afterward. Coleman tapped the photograph. This man was Dr. Alexander Harris, the program's chief scientist. Brilliant mind. Obsessive. Believed certain individuals possessed natural neurological advantages that could be enhanced to create, well, the term they used was hyper-enabled operators. Martinez studied the photograph. Super soldiers. Nothing so dramatic as comic books, but yes, essentially. The ability to process visual information faster than normal humans. To calculate ballistic solutions intuitively. To sense minute environmental changes most people can't perceive. Coleman's voice had dropped, as if the office might be monitored despite his regular security sweeps. David was their greatest success, could make shots that should have been mathematically impossible. Until he walked away, Martinez said, connecting fragments of information he had gathered over years. Coleman nodded grimly. He discovered certain operations he'd been part of weren't what he'd been told. Targets identified as terrorist leaders who were actually political dissidents. Weapons facilities that turned out to be civilian infrastructure. He closed the folder. David threatened to go public. There was a negotiated settlement. They let him retire quietly with his family, provided he stayed silent. And now his daughter shows the same abilities, Martinez said quietly. Which presents us with a problem. Coleman leaned back in his chair, the weight of command heavy in his posture. If Harris is still involved with whatever Athena has evolved into, he'll want her. And Harris always gets what he wants, eventually. Sir, with respect, she's a civilian contractor, not military personnel. They can't just... They can do whatever they want, Sergeant. Coleman interrupted, his voice hardening. Men like Harris operate in shadows so deep that even the oversight committees don't know they exist. Budget lines buried in classified appropriations. Operations authorized with nods and handshakes rather than signed orders. Martinez absorbed this, his expression troubled. What do we do? Coleman was silent for a long moment, weighing decades of institutional loyalty against a personal debt to a man who had saved his life more than once. We do what David would have wanted, he finally said, reaching for his secure phone. We protect his daughter, even from our own side if necessary. As Coleman dialed, Martinez noticed another document in the open folder, a black and white photograph of a younger David Johnson, rifle in hand, standing beside a military vehicle in some unnamed desert. Written across the bottom in faded ink was a single sentence, "Not all enemies wear different flags." Coleman's call connected. This is Colonel Coleman. Security clearance Alpha Echo 39. I need access to the Ghost Protocol files, particularly the termination agreement with subject Johnson David M. He listened briefly, his expression hardening. Yes, I understand the sensitivity. That's precisely why I'm calling. We may have a situation. After disconnecting, Coleman fixed Martinez with a grave stare. Things are going to get complicated. Harris is still active, still running the program under a new designation. And according to my source, he's been looking for someone with David's abilities for years. Maya Johnson has no idea what's coming, does she? Martinez asked. Coleman shook his head slowly. David kept her hidden for a reason. Taught her to shoot, but also to disappear. I think he knew someday they'd come looking for a replacement. He tapped the folder. According to this, the abilities tend to be hereditary. Harris probably suspected David's daughter might have inherited his gift. Sir, what exactly are we dealing with here? Martinez asked, a new edge of concern in his voice. Coleman opened a locked drawer in his desk, removing another folder. This one marked with a simple black triangle in the corner, the designation for operations so classified their very existence was denied. From it, he extracted a single document and pushed it across the desk. This is the real Ghost Protocol, he said quietly. The agreement David negotiated before his retirement. Read the highlighted section. Martinez scanned the document, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When he looked up, his eyes held a new understanding of the danger they faced. "My God," he whispered. "Does Maya have any idea what her father was really involved in?" "I doubt it," Coleman replied. "David wanted to protect her from all this, but now she's walked right into the lion's den." Outside Coleman's office, the afternoon sun continued its arc across Fort Bragg's carefully maintained grounds. In the distance, the crack of rifles from the qualification ranges provided a rhythmic counterpoint to the base's daily operations. Soldiers went about their duties unaware of the shadowy currents beginning to stir beneath the surface of their ordered military world. In the armory, Maya Johnson continued her work methodically, maintaining the weapons that American soldiers carried into harm's way. Her hands moved with practiced precision, her mind focused on the familiar tasks that had become her refuge. She didn't know that forces had been set in motion by her morning demonstration, forces her father had spent his final years trying to escape. The invisible war was beginning again. And this time, Maya Johnson stood at its center. The fading daylight cast long shadows across Maya Johnson's apartment as she knelt beside her bed, fingers searching for the hidden latch beneath the floorboards. The events at the range had shattered 5 years of careful anonymity in a single morning. Now she needed answers that only her father's legacy could provide. The hidden compartment opened with a soft click, revealing a weathered metal lockbox, military-grade, designed to withstand fire and water damage. Maya removed it carefully, setting it on her small kitchen table. The combination was her father's sniper school graduation date, followed by her birthday, a personal code between them that no one else would know. The lock disengaged with a solid metallic sound that seemed to echo in the quiet apartment. Inside lay the carefully preserved artifacts of David Johnson's hidden life. A leather-bound journal filled with handwritten ballistic calculations and observations. 3 unmarked military medals in a velvet pouch. A sealed envelope with, "For Maya, when necessary," written in her father's distinctive block lettering. And an encrypted USB drive, matte black, with no identifying marks. Maya lifted the journal first, its leather cover worn smooth from years of handling. The pages contained her father's meticulous notes, complex trajectory, calculations, atmospheric effect formulas, and observations about how Earth's rotation affected bullets at extreme distances. Concepts that went far beyond conventional military sniper training. The memory surfaced with clarity. She was 16, standing beside her father on the vast Montana property where they practiced without prying eyes. The morning air was sharp, with the scent of pine and gun oil. Her father had set up a target at what seemed an impossible distance, barely visible even through the high-powered scope. Most snipers are taught that 1/500 meters is maximum effective range, David Johnson had explained, making minute adjustments to the rifle's scope. They're told the mathematics don't work beyond that, too many variables, too much uncertainty. "But that's not true," Maya had asked, watching his confident movements. "Mathematics doesn't have limits, Maya. Only our understanding of it does." When he handed her the rifle. "At extreme distances, you're not just shooting through space, you're shooting through time. The bullet will travel for seconds, not milliseconds. You need to calculate where the target will be, not where it is. How do you account for all the variables: wind, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure?" David had tapped his temple with a weathered finger. "You feel it. The equations are just a starting point. Beyond that, you have to develop an intuition that conventional science doesn't recognize." Maya had settled behind the rifle, applying the principles he'd taught her. When she fired, the bullet found its mark at 1/700 meters a shot. that should have been nearly impossible for someone her age. Her father's expression had been a mixture of pride and something darker. "You have the gift, Maya, just like me. That's why I need to teach you how to control it, and when not to use it." The memory faded as Maya turned to the encrypted USB drive. She connected it to her laptop, unsurprised when it demanded a password. After several attempts using combinations of personal dates and locations, the drive remained locked. Whatever secrets it contained, her father had ensured they wouldn't be easily accessed. Returning to the lockbox, Maya discovered a hidden compartment in the lid. Inside was a faded photograph she'd never seen before, her father, standing in desert terrain, beside Colonel Coleman and another man. This third figure caught her attention, tall, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses, and the intense focus of a scientist rather than a soldier. Despite the casual pose, something about him raised Maya's instincts. He stood slightly apart, observing rather than participating in the moment. On the back of the photograph, her father had written 3 words and a date: Athena, Kabul, 2008. Maya stared at the image pieces of a puzzle beginning to form in her mind. Her father had never mentioned any Athena project, nor had he spoken of operations in Afghanistan beyond vague references to classified deployments. What had he been involved in that required such secrecy even from his daughter? As she contemplated the photograph, a subtle movement outside her apartment window caught her attention. Maya's reactions were instantaneous: lights off, body low, moving to the side of the window rather than directly in front. Through a narrow gap in the curtains, she observed a sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there earlier. Inside, a figure sat motionless, watching her building. 5 years of maintaining a low profile had honed Maya's situational awareness to razor sharpness. The surveillance was professional, minimal movement, positioned with good sightlines to both the front and rear exits of her apartment complex. Military or intelligence, not local law enforcement. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. "They'll find you eventually. Be ready when they do." Maya methodically returned the items to the lockbox, securing it in the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Whatever move came next, she wouldn't make it with someone watching. Settling into the darkness of her apartment, she prepared for a long night of counter-surveillance, a skill her father had taught her alongside marksmanship. Colonel Coleman's office at Fort Bragg headquarters had transformed into an impromptu situation room. The normal overhead lights remained off, with only a desk lamp illuminating the classified documents spread across the surface. Martinez stood at parade rest near the door, while Reed paced with the contained energy of a predator in too small a cage. "How much influence does this Harris have?" Reed asked, breaking the tense silence. Coleman's weathered face remained impassive. "Enough to walk onto any military installation in the country without prior notice. Enough to access files that technically don't exist. Enough to make people disappear into programs with no oversight. You're talking about a U.S. government agency operating outside the law." Reed said, disbelief evident in his tone. "I'm talking about the shadows between agencies," Coleman corrected. "Projects funded through black budgets, running on presidential findings that bypass congressional oversight. Harris heads the Advanced Defense Research Projects Unit, officially a think tank that evaluates future warfare technologies." "And unofficially?" Martinez asked. Coleman gestured to the file marked Ghost Protocol. "They identify and develop individuals with exceptional abilities. David Johnson was their crown jewel, a shooter who could make mathematically impossible shots through what Harris called enhanced neurological processing." Reed stopped pacing. "You're talking about the Ghost, like he was some kind of superhuman." "Nothing so dramatic," Coleman replied. "Some people have perfect pitch in music. Others have eidetic memory. David could process ballistic variables faster than a computer and perceive environmental conditions most humans can't detect. Harris believes these abilities can be enhanced, weaponized. And Maya Johnson inherited these abilities, Martinez concluded. Coleman nodded grimly. Based on what you both witnessed, yes. Which makes her valuable to Harris in ways she can't imagine. We need to warn her, Reed said, his earlier suspicion of Maya now replaced by concern. It's not that simple, Coleman countered. Harris is already here. He requested a meeting first thing tomorrow, and his credentials give him access I can't refuse. We need to be careful about what moves we make. The office door opened without a knock, causing all three men to turn sharply. A tall, slender man in his mid-50s entered with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to access without permission. His wire-rimmed glasses and precisely tailored suit marked him as a civilian, but his bearing suggested military background. Behind him, two younger men in identical dark suits took positions outside the door, closing it firmly. "Colonel Coleman," the man said pleasantly. "It's been some time." "Dr. Harris?" Coleman acknowledged, not rising from his desk. "This is a secure briefing." "Yes, I can see that." Harris glanced at the open files. "Ghost Protocol. How nostalgic." His gaze shifted to Reed and Martinez. "Captain Reed and Master Sergeant Martinez, I presume, the witnesses to Ms. Johnson's remarkable performance this morning." The calculated precision of Harris's knowledge confirmed Coleman's fears. Nothing happened at Fort Bragg without Harris knowing immediately. "We haven't been formally introduced," Harris continued smoothly. "Dr. Alexander Harris, Advanced Defense Research Projects Unit. I've had the privilege of working with exceptional military talents for nearly 3 decades." He smiled thinly. "Including Maya Johnson's father." "What exactly do you want with Ms. Johnson?" Reed asked directly, military protocol momentarily forgotten. Harris studied Reed with clinical interest. "Captain, imagine a sniper who could guarantee first-round hits at distances beyond 3,000 meters, who could account for variables most ballistic computers can't process, who could eliminate high-value targets with zero collateral damage under any environmental conditions." He paused. "How many American lives would that capability save?" The question hung in the air, its patriotic appeal carefully calculated. "David Johnson could do those things," Coleman interjected, "until he discovered the targets weren't always who you claimed they were." A flicker of annoyance crossed Harris's otherwise composed features. David made unfortunate choices based on incomplete information, but his abilities were real and potentially hereditary. Ms. Johnson represents an opportunity to continue vital national security research. "She's a civilian contractor, not a research subject," Martinez said firmly. Harris smiled. "Of course, which is why I'm proposing a voluntary program. Ms. Johnson would be offered a position with ADRU, exceptional compensation, full benefits, and the opportunity to serve her country in ways few can." "And if she declines?" Coleman asked, though he already knew the answer. "Let's focus on the positive opportunity." Harris deflected smoothly. "I'll be meeting with Ms. Johnson tomorrow to discuss the proposal personally." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, gentlemen. This matter falls under Presidential Finding 13-27. Any interference would constitute a national security breach." After Harris departed, the office remained silent for a long moment. "He's going to take her with or without her consent," Reed finally said, anger evident in his controlled tone. Coleman closed the classified file with deliberate care. "Not if we move first. Martinez secured transport for Ms. Johnson, unofficial channels only. Reed, I need you to create a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" Reed asked. "The kind that even Harris can't ignore," Coleman replied. It's time to call in some old favors. The knock at Maya's door came at precisely 22:17, 3 short raps followed by 2 longer ones, a pattern that immediately raised her alertness. The surveillance vehicle remained parked across the street, its occupant still watching the building's main entrance. Maya approached the door silently, Glock 19 held at low ready. "Identify," she said quietly. "Martinez, not alone." Maya checked through the peephole, confirming Martinez's presence alongside Captain Reed. She unlocked the door without disengaging the security chain, maintaining tactical advantage while assessing the situation. "You're being watched," she said simply. "We know," Martinez replied. "May we come in time-sensitive situation." Maya closed the door to remove the chain, then admitted both men. Reed's eyes immediately registered the pistol in her hand with professional appreciation rather than surprise. "Good operational security," he noted. "You've had more than just shooting lessons." Maya secured the weapon, but kept it within reach. "Why are you here?" Martinez moved to the window, carefully checking sightlines without exposing himself. "Dr. Alexander Harris arrived at Fort Bragg 3 hours ago. He's scheduled to meet with you tomorrow with a job offer you won't be allowed to refuse." The name struck Maya like a physical blow. "The man in the photograph with my father and Coleman." Reed looked surprised. "You know about Harris?" "I found a photograph tonight," Maya explained. "My father, Coleman, and a man I didn't recognize. The word Athena was written on the back." Martinez and Reed exchanged significant glances. "Project Athena," Martinez confirmed, "a classified program your father was part of. Harris was the scientific director." "Coleman sent us to warn you," Reed continued. "Harris isn't just offering you a job. He wants to study you use your abilities the way he used your father's." Maya absorbed this pieces falling into place. Her father's warnings about men who would come for her, his insistence that she keep her skills hidden, his deathbed plea to make different choices than he had. "What exactly was Project Athena?" she asked. "According to Coleman, it identified individuals with exceptional neurological processing abilities," Martinez explained. "People who could calculate complex variables, instantly perceive environmental conditions others can't detect." "Your father could make shots that defied conventional ballistics," Reed added. "Harris believes you've inherited the same abilities." Maya thought of the journal in her hidden lockbox, filled with calculations and observations that went beyond conventional military doctrine. The pieces were aligning into a disturbing picture. "What did they use my father for?" she asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Martinez's expression darkened. "Targeted eliminations. Shots so precise and at such extreme distances that they could never be traced back to U.S. operations." "Assassinations," Maya translated bluntly. "Your father believed he was eliminating terrorist leaders, warlords, threats to American forces," Reed said, "until he discovered some targets were political dissidents, opposition leaders, people inconvenient to certain foreign policy objectives. That's why he left," Maya realized aloud. "Why he was so insistent I never use what he taught me." "Harris will be here tomorrow with official authorization to recruit you," Martinez said urgently. "If you refuse, he has contingencies. We need to move you tonight." Maya's mind worked rapidly through the tactical situation. "The surveillance outside Harris's people." Reed nodded. "Advance team. Standard protocol." "Two options," Maya said, thinking aloud. "Run now, become a fugitive from my own government. Or meet Harris, understand exactly what I'm dealing with." "Meeting Harris puts you on his territory," Reed cautioned. "Once you're in his program, you'll never get out." Your father barely managed it, and only because he had leverage. Maya moved to the window, carefully observing the surveillance vehicle without exposing herself. Years of her father's training crystallized into clarity. I need to know what's on that USB drive, she decided. Whatever leverage my father had, it's probably there. USB drive? Martinez asked. Maya explained about the lockbox and its contents. The drive is encrypted. I couldn't access it. Reed considered this. I know someone who might help former NSA cryptographer works private sector now, but we'd need to get the drive to him without Harris's people knowing. Maya made her decision. I'll meet with Harris tomorrow as scheduled. Play along with whatever he proposes. That gives us time to decode the drive and understand what we're really dealing with. It's risky, Martinez warned. Harris is persuasive, and he has official authority. My father prepared me for this moment my entire life, Maya replied with quiet certainty. I just didn't understand why until now. After establishing secure communication protocols and arranging for Reed's cryptographer contact, Martinez and Reed departed separately to avoid drawing attention from the surveillance team. Maya returned to the window, watching the sedan still parked across the street. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a strange sense of purpose replacing the emptiness. David Johnson had spent years teaching her not just how to shoot, but how to think, how to observe, how to survive in a world where shadows held more truth than light. Tomorrow, she would meet the man who had used her father as a weapon, and she would begin to understand the true nature of the legacy she had inherited. Morning light streamed through the windows of Colonel Coleman's office as Maya sat composed and alert, waiting for Dr. Harris to arrive. She had dressed with deliberate care, professional and unremarkable nothing that would reveal the tension coiling within her. Coleman stood by the window, his silver hair catching the sunlight, his posture military straight, despite the weight of decades in uniform. Neither had spoken much since Maya's arrival, both understanding that surveillance was a possibility even here. The door opened precisely at 0900, admitting Dr. Alexander Harris, followed by two assistants carrying slim briefcases. In person, Harris matched the photograph Maya had discovered, tall, lean, with the same wire-rimmed glasses and calculating gaze. Only the addition of silver at his temples marked the passage of years. Ms. Johnson, Harris smiled warmly, extending his hand. A pleasure to finally meet you. I worked closely with your father for many years. I accepted the handshake with professional courtesy, noting the surprising strength in his grip. Dr. Harris, I understand you've come a long way to speak with me. Distance is meaningless when talent like yours is involved, Harris replied, gesturing for his assistants to set up their materials. Colonel Coleman has kindly allowed us the use of his office for this discussion. Coleman's expression remained neutral, but Maya caught the subtle tension in his jaw. This was not a courtesy, but a power play, Harris demonstrating his authority by commandeering a senior officer's space. I'll leave you to your meeting, Coleman said, moving toward the door. Actually, Colonel, I'd prefer you stay, Harris countered smoothly. Your perspective would be valuable given your history with the program. Coleman paused, then returned to his position by the window without comment. Harris turned his attention fully to Maya. Ms. Johnson, I represent the Advanced Defense Research Projects Unit. We identify exceptional individuals with unique capabilities and provide them opportunities to serve their country in specialized roles. He paused. Your demonstration yesterday morning came to our attention. 3 shots at 1,000 meters perfect placement under variable wind conditions. Maya maintained her composure. Captain Reed was conducting a standard evaluation of my marksmanship abilities. There was nothing standard about what you demonstrated, Harris corrected his tone, still pleasant but insistent. You showed abilities that exceed qualified military snipers with decades of experience, abilities remarkably similar to your father's. One of Harris's assistants opened a briefcase, removing a tablet which he placed before Maya. On the screen played high-definition video of her shooting demonstration, multiple angles, including close-ups of her adjustments to the rifle and the resulting target impacts. The base security cameras are quite sophisticated, Harris noted. They captured some fascinating details, like how you adjusted for wind changes before they were detectable to instruments. Maya watched the footage with outward calm, while internally calculating how many surveillance systems had been monitoring her movements. I've always had good instincts for conditions. Not instincts, Ms. Johnson, neurological processing capabilities that allow you to perceive and calculate environmental variables beyond normal human range. Harris leaned forward slightly. The same capabilities your father possessed. Capabilities we helped him develop and refine through Project Athena. Maya met his gaze directly. And now you want to help me develop mine. Harris smiled, appreciating her directness. I'm offering you an opportunity few ever receive. A position with ADRU as a special technical consultant. Salary starting at $250,000 annually with housing allowance, full medical benefits, and discretionary budget. You would work with our research team to explore the full potential of your unique abilities. As what exactly a research subject? A weapon. As a valuable asset to national security, Harris corrected smoothly. Your father's contributions saved countless American lives by eliminating threats with surgical precision before they could harm our forces. Maya noted his careful language, eliminating threats rather than killing people. The sanitization of lethal force through bureaucratic terminology. And if I decline this generous offer, she asked, though she already anticipated the answer. Harris's smile remained unchanged, but something hardened in his eyes. Your abilities represent a national security asset, Ms. Johnson. Presidential Finding 13-27 authorizes the securing of such assets through various means. He paused. I would strongly prefer your voluntary participation. The threat beneath the polite phrasing was unmistakable. I need time to consider, Maya said, maintaining her composure. Of course. Harris placed a business card on the desk. You have until tomorrow morning. My team will remain in the area to answer any questions and facilitate your transition once you accept. After Harris and his assistants departed, Coleman exhaled slowly. That went exactly as expected. He's not giving me a choice, Maya observed. No, he's not. Coleman moved to his desk, speaking quietly. Harris doesn't make idle threats. If you don't voluntarily join his program by tomorrow, he'll create a pretext to bring you in involuntarily, national security concerns, psychological evaluation, whatever works. Maya considered her options. I need more time. Reed is working on decrypting my father's USB drive. There might be information there we can use. Coleman nodded thoughtfully. There's one way to buy time while appearing to cooperate. He hesitated before continuing. Reed mentioned a shooting challenge, something at extreme distance that would be nearly impossible. What are you suggesting? Accept Harris's offer conditionally. Tell him you want to demonstrate your abilities first on your terms. A shot so challenging it would require special arrangements, perhaps at the Army's long-range testing facility at White Sands. That could buy us several days. Maya considered the strategy. A shot at what distance? 800 meters, Coleman said without hesitation. Beyond what even your father ever attempted officially. It would require transport to White Sands, special equipment preparation, weather monitoring, all legitimate delays that Harris couldn't reasonably refuse. And you think he'd agree to this condition? Harris's scientific curiosity is his weakness. The opportunity to document your abilities at that extreme range would be irresistible. Coleman's eyes held a spark of determination. It's a gamble, but it might be our best option. Maya nodded, decision made. Then we'll give Dr. Harris exactly what he wants, a demonstration he'll never forget. The firing range at Fort Bragg felt different, as Maya walked beside Captain Reed, both aware of the surveillance now openly following their movements. Harris's team maintained a discreet distance, but their presence was intended to be noticed, a reminder of the invisible leash being tightened around Maya's future. "My contact is working on the USB encryption," Reed said quietly as they entered the armory. "Military-grade security, but he's found a potential vulnerability. Needs another 48 hours minimum." Maya nodded almost imperceptibly. Coleman's extreme distance challenge idea might buy us that time. Harris took the bait. Arrangements are already being made for a demonstration at White Sands. 800 meters is beyond theoretical maximum for consistent accuracy, Reed noted, even with the most advanced system available. "That's the point," Maya replied. "The preparations alone will take days. Transport, weather monitoring, specialized equipment." Reed studied her with new respect. "You actually think you can make that shot, don't you?" Maya didn't answer directly. Instead, she removed her father's journal from her bag, opening it to a page filled with complex mathematical formulas. "My father's calculations for extreme distance shooting," she explained. "He developed a system that accounts for variables most ballistics programs ignore: micro-atmospheric layers, harmonic resonance in the barrel, even the Coriolis effect relative to target direction." Reed examined the journal with professional interest. "This goes beyond any sniper training I've seen. Some of these variables aren't even in the military ballistics manuals." "Because they're only relevant beyond 2,000 meters, Maya explained. "At extreme distances, a bullet travels long enough that factors like the Earth's rotation become significant." As they continued discussing technical aspects of the upcoming challenge, Maya noticed Martinez entering the armory with purposeful strides. His expression conveyed urgency beneath his professional demeanor. "We have a complication," he said without preamble, his voice low. "Harris is accelerating the timeline. White Sands tomorrow, not next week. He's arranged military transport departing at 0600. Maya exchanged a concerned glance with Reed. "That doesn't give us enough time for the decryption." "There's more," Martinez continued. "Coleman's been ordered to Washington for an emergency budget meeting. Convenient timing that removes our highest-ranking ally." The implications were clear. Harris was systematically isolating Maya, removing potential support, and accelerating events to prevent any counter-strategy from developing. "What about the USB drive?" Maya asked quietly. Reed shook his head. "My contact needs more time. We'd have to bring him with us to White Sands." "Too risky," Martinez countered. Harris's team would identify any unauthorized personnel immediately. Maya considered their dwindling options. "Then we change strategies. I'll proceed to White Sands as planned, maintain the appearance of cooperation. You two continue working on the USB decryption here. Once you have the contents, find a secure way to communicate what you discover." "You'll be alone with Harris and his team," Reed warned. "No backup." "I've been preparing for this my entire life," Maya replied with quiet confidence. "I just didn't know it until now." As their conversation concluded, Maya noticed one of Harris's observers speaking into a communication device while watching their group. Time was running out faster than anticipated. Whatever secrets lay encrypted on her father's USB drive, she would have to face White Sands without them. The desert air of White Sands Missile Range shimmered with heat as Maya stepped from the military transport aircraft. The New Mexico landscape stretched before her, vast, unforgiving, and perfect for what Harris had in mind. The isolation was both tactical and psychological, removing her from potential allies while providing ideal conditions for extreme long-range shooting. Dr. Harris greeted her on the tarmac, his enthusiasm barely contained beneath his professional exterior. "Ms. Johnson, welcome to White Sands. Perfect conditions for our demonstration, minimal humidity, consistent wind patterns, excellent visibility." Maya noted the small team of technicians unloading specialized equipment from a separate transport, high-definition cameras, weather monitoring stations, and what appeared to be advanced tracking systems. This wasn't just a demonstration. It was a full scientific documentation of her abilities. "The rifle systems are already at the range," Harris continued as they walked toward waiting vehicles. "We've prepared 3 options for you to evaluate: a modified Barrett M82A1, an experimental Chaytak M300, and a custom system developed by our own engineers." Maya maintained her composure while mentally calculating the growing complexity of her situation. Harris had prepared thoroughly, eliminating variables and establishing complete control over the environment. Even her choice of weapon was carefully curated to his specifications. "When will the demonstration take place?" she asked. "We'll begin preparations this afternoon. The actual attempt is scheduled for 0700 tomorrow, optimal atmospheric conditions according to our meteorologists." Harris studied her with undisguised scientific interest. "I've waited a long time to document abilities like yours in a controlled setting. Your father never allowed such comprehensive monitoring. The vehicles delivered them to a specialized range facility rarely used except for weapons testing. Unlike conventional military ranges, this one extended beyond visual limits, with targets positioned at distances that challenged the curvature of the Earth itself. High-tech observation posts dotted the landscape, allowing precise monitoring of bullet impacts without sending personnel downrange. As Maya surveyed the facility, a technician approached Harris with a tablet displaying real-time data. "Sir, we're detecting unusual atmospheric disturbances moving in from the southwest. Potential dust storm developing within 36 hours. Harris frowned slightly. "Accelerate the preparations. We'll conduct the demonstration at 1700 today instead of tomorrow morning." The change in schedule sent a chill through Maya despite the desert heat. Harris was eliminating even the minimal delay they had counted on. Whatever Reed and Martinez were doing with the USB drive, she couldn't expect their findings before facing this challenge. "That doesn't allow much time for familiarization with the weapons systems," she observed. "I have complete confidence in your adaptability, Ms. Johnson," Harris replied smoothly. "After all, your father could adjust to new systems within minutes. I expect you share that trait." As the technicians continued setting up equipment, Harris led Maya to a climate-controlled structure serving as the command center. Inside, digital displays monitored weather conditions, ballistic calculations, and topographical information about the range. A separate area contained the 3 rifle systems Harris had mentioned, each mounted on precision shooting platforms. "Impressive facility." Maya noted, her eyes cataloging potential exits, communication systems, and security measures with the automatic assessment her father had taught her. "Purpose-built for testing next-generation weapons systems," Harris explained. "Today, you're the system we're evaluating." The clinical detachment in his tone confirmed Maya's understanding of how Harris viewed her, not as a person, but as a capability to be measured, documented, and ultimately controlled. A technician approached with a sealed case. "The target positioning is complete, sir. 3,800 meters as specified. We've installed the thermal imaging system for verification." Harris nodded approval before turning to Maya. "Take some time to evaluate the weapons systems. Select whichever you prefer. A technician will assist with any adjustments you require." As Harris stepped away to consult with his team, Maya moved to inspect the three rifles. Each represented the pinnacle of long-range shooting technology, but her attention focused on the custom system, a hybrid design incorporating elements she recognized from prototypes her father had once mentioned. The scope alone likely cost more than her annual salary, with digital ballistic calculation assistance built into the optics. While familiarizing herself with the weapons, Maya observed Harris's team with peripheral awareness. Their movements suggested military training beneath civilian clothing, precise, efficient, constantly aware of their surroundings. Not scientists, but operators with specialized skills. Harris wasn't just documenting her abilities, he was securing them with armed escorts disguised as technical support. The afternoon progressed with methodical preparation. Maya selected the custom rifle system, making minor adjustments to fit her shooting style while mentally preparing for the challenge ahead. The target, a standard silhouette, augmented with electronic sensors, stood at a distance that stretched the theoretical limits of ballistic science. Even with perfect conditions and equipment, a successful shot at 3,800 meters would require abilities beyond conventional training. As the scheduled time approached, Harris gathered his team for final briefings. Maya used the moment to step outside the command center ostensibly to assess environmental conditions firsthand. The desert air carried the faint scent of sage and dust, the wind maintaining a steady 3 to 5 mph from the southwest. Ideal conditions for extreme long-range shooting. Her satellite phone vibrated with a text message, the secure communication channel Reed had established before her departure. Partial decryption successful. USB contains classified operational details, codenamed Broken Arrow. Evidence of unauthorized eliminations targeting U.S. citizens. Proceed with extreme caution. Harris implicated at highest level. Maya deleted the message immediately, her mind processing the implications. Her father hadn't just discovered that some targets were political rather than military. He had uncovered operations targeting American citizens, a direct violation of Executive Order 12333 prohibiting assassination. That would explain the leverage he had used to escape the program. The realization clarified her father's warnings and his insistence that she never use her abilities for them. David Johnson had discovered he was being used to eliminate threats to powerful interests within the government itself, not just foreign adversaries. As Maya returned to the command center, she observed Harris with new understanding. Behind the scientific facade lay something more dangerous, a man who viewed constitutional protections as inconvenient obstacles to what he considered necessary action. "We're ready to proceed, Ms. Johnson," Harris announced as she entered. "The observation team has confirmed target positioning and environmental conditions. Are you prepared for the attempt?" Maya nodded, her decision crystallizing. "I'll need 15 minutes for final calculations and preparation." Harris checked his watch. "You have 10. We're racing the weather system moving in from the southwest." The accelerated timeline confirmed Maya's suspicions. Harris was eliminating variables that might interfere with his plans, including potential communication from Reed and Martinez. Once she demonstrated her abilities, she would be immediately transported to an ADRU facility, effectively disappearing into the shadow world her father had escaped. As technicians made final adjustments to monitoring equipment, Maya took position behind the custom rifle system. The scope's digital display provided real-time data on wind speed, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure, all elements affecting a bullet's trajectory over extreme distance. Maya made her own calculations mentally, comparing them with the scope's suggestions. The difference was subtle but significant. The computerized system failed to account for several variables her father had identified as critical beyond 3,000 meters. Harris stood nearby, watching with undisguised fascination as Maya made minute adjustments to the scope settings. "The system's ballistic calculator is the most advanced ever developed," he noted. Yet you're modifying its recommendations. The calculator doesn't account for spin drift at this distance, Maya explained carefully, managing what information she revealed, or the effect of the Earth's rotation relative to target direction. Fascinating, Harris murmured, signaling to a technician to document her adjustments. Your father mentioned these factors, but we never fully incorporated them into our models. Maya completed her preparations, settling into the shooting position with the fluid grace that came from thousands of hours of practice. The rifle became an extension of her body, the connection between shooter and weapon transcending mechanical interaction. Through the scope, the target appeared as little more than a speck, at the extreme distance, 800 meters beyond what most military snipers would consider possible for consistent accuracy. Maya regulated her breathing, establishing the rhythm her father had taught her. Her heartbeat slowed, each pulse distinct and controlled. As she prepared to take the shot, a memory surfaced with unexpected clarity. Her father in his hospital room, weakened by cancer, but his eyes still intense with purpose. One day, they'll find you, Maya. When that happens, remember your gift isn't a weapon unless you allow it to be. The skill itself is neutral. It's the purpose behind it that matters. The memory crystallized her resolve. Whatever happened after this shot, she would not become what Harris wanted, a controllable asset to be aimed at targets of his choosing. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Johnson, Harris said, his voice distant through her focused concentration. Maya made a final adjustment for wind, the calculation flowing through her consciousness not as mathematical formulas, but as intuitive understanding. She sensed, rather than measured, how the bullet would travel, how it would interact with atmospheric layers, how the Earth's rotation would affect its path over the 4 seconds of flight time. The trigger brake was clean, the rifle's report echoing across the desert landscape. For that extended moment, as the bullet traveled toward its distant target, time seemed to stretch. Maya maintained her position, tracking through the scope as the vapor trail marked the bullet's path through the shimmering air. The impact, when it came, registered on multiple monitoring systems simultaneously. The command center erupted in controlled excitement as technicians confirmed what the sensors had detected, a perfect hit at 800 meters a shot that defied conventional ballistic science. Harris's expression combined triumph and validation. "Extraordinary," he breathed, reviewing the data streaming across the monitors. "Even better results than your father achieved in controlled settings." Maya rose from the shooting position with deliberate calm, though her mind was racing through contingencies. The demonstration had confirmed everything Harris suspected about her abilities and sealed whatever fate he had planned for her. "You've more than validated our expectations, Ms. Johnson," Harris said, his scientific detachment momentarily broken by genuine excitement. "We'll begin immediate transport to our research facility in Virginia. My team has already packed your essential belongings from your apartment." The presumption confirmed Maya's understanding. Harris had never intended to give her a real choice. The demonstration was merely a formality before taking what he considered a valuable asset into custody. "There's something you should know first," Maya said, her voice steady despite the tension coiling within her. "Something about my father's legacy that might interest you." Harris's attention focused with laser intensity. "Go on." "My father left me more than just his abilities," Maya continued carefully. "He left insurance-detailed records of every operation he conducted under Project Athena, including operations codenamed Broken Arrow." The slight widening of Harris's eyes confirmed the significance of the code name. For the first time since their meeting, his composure cracked slightly. "Those records were classified and contained on secure servers," he said, his tone hardening. "Your father couldn't have accessed them." "My father was more than just a shooter," Maya countered. "He anticipated moves before they happened, including yours. The records are secure, but accessible if anything happens to me. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Harris studied her with recalibrated assessment, calculating this unexpected variable. "What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Johnson?" he finally asked. "A modification to your offer," Maya replied, with the calm confidence her father had instilled in her. "I'll consult with your program on my terms, no residency requirements, no isolation, complete operational discretion. I choose which projects to support based on full disclosure of targets and purpose." Harris's expression darkened. "Those terms are unacceptable from a security standpoint." "Perhaps," Maya acknowledged, "but consider the alternative congressional hearings about unauthorized domestic operations, international exposure of assassination programs, targeting political figures, rather than military threats." The command center had grown silent technicians, sensing the tension without understanding its source. Harris dismissed them with a sharp gesture, waiting until they had exited before responding. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ms. Johnson. Presidential Finding 13-27 provides broad authority to contain national security risks, including those posed by individuals with unauthorized classified information." The threat was explicit, now all pretense of scientific interest abandoned. "I made the shot you wanted," Maya replied, unflinching. "Now we negotiate terms, or my father's insurance policy activates automatically." Their standoff was interrupted by the sudden entrance of a technician, his expression urgent. "Sir, we have an incoming aircraft military transport. Not on our manifest. ETA 3 minutes." Harris moved quickly to the monitoring station, observing the approaching aircraft with growing concern. "Get me secure communications with Andrews. This facility is locked down by presidential authority." Maya recognized the moment of disruption as tactical opportunity. While Harris focused on the unexpected development, she retrieved her satellite phone, sending a prearranged signal to the number Reed had provided. Outside, the sound of approaching aircraft grew louder. Through the command center windows, Maya observed a C-130 transport plane, making its approach to the facility's runway, the same type of aircraft that had brought her to White Sands, but definitely not part of Harris's carefully orchestrated plan. "Aircraft is landing against instructions," a security team member reported. "They're claiming priority authorization under JSOC directive." Harris's expression hardened into cold fury. "Secure the subject," he ordered, dropping all pretense of scientific interest. "Prepare for immediate extraction via alternate route." As security personnel moved toward Maya, the command center door opened again. Colonel Coleman entered, still wearing his formal uniform from the Washington budget meeting that had supposedly removed him from the equation. "Dr. Harris," Coleman said calmly, "I believe we have a situation to discuss." Behind him stood Captain Reed and Master Sergeant Martinez, along with 4 Special Forces operators whose insignia had been removed from their uniforms. The chessboard had suddenly and dramatically realigned. Dawn broke over Fort Bragg with the hushed reverence of a prayer. The air hung still and cool, the day not yet committed to its path. Maya Johnson stood at the edge of the specialized long-range firing complex, watching as first light painted the distant hills in watercolor shades of amber and gold. She had arrived 90 minutes before the scheduled demonstration, long before the observers who would soon gather to witness what most considered impossible. 3,800 meters, a distance where mathematics strained against physical limitations, where a bullet would travel for nearly 4 full seconds before reaching its target subject to wind currents at multiple elevations affected by the Earth's rotation, the shooter's heartbeat, and a dozen other variables most marksmen never considered. Maya moved with quiet purpose, surveying the terrain with the methodical precision her father had taught her. Not just looking, but seeing, reading the landscape like a text written in shadow and light. The smallest ripple of grass revealed air currents invisible to instruments. The way heat shimmered above distant rocks told stories of temperature gradients. These were the subtle languages of distance that David Johnson had taught his daughter to interpret when most girls her age were learning algebra. She carried her father's journal tucked inside her jacket, its leather binding worn smooth from years of handling. The pages contained more than ballistic formulas and wind calculations. They held David Johnson's legacy. His attempt to pass on understanding that went beyond military doctrine or scientific measurement. As Maya completed her terrain assessment, a memory surfaced with the clarity of yesterday. She was 16, standing beside her father on a Montana ridgeline. Before them stretched a valley painted in summer greens, a small steel target barely visible on the opposite slope. Most shooters think distance is the challenge, David had explained, adjusting the scope on his custom rifle. But distance is just mathematics, bullet drop wind drift, all predictable with the right equations. Then what is the real challenge? Maya had asked, squinting against the morning sun. The separation between mind and body. Her father's weathered hand had rested briefly on her shoulder. At extreme distances, you're not just aiming at where the target is. You're connecting with where it will be when the bullet arrives. You're extending your consciousness through time and space. Maya had frowned teenage skepticism evident in her expression. That sounds mystical, Dad. David Johnson had smiled then, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. The military calls it enhanced neurological processing. I call it seeing with more than your eyes. He had handed her the rifle. Don't aim at the target, Maya. Become the bullet's path. The memory faded as Maya heard vehicles approaching. The day's witnesses were arriving military personnel in various uniforms, civilians whose bearings suggested intelligence backgrounds, technicians with equipment for documenting the attempt. And somewhere among them, Dr. Alexander Harris, the man who had used her father's extraordinary abilities for purposes David Johnson had ultimately rejected. Maya withdrew to the designated firing position, a covered platform with mats for prone shooting. The 3 rifles she had been offered for the demonstration were already positioned, each representing the pinnacle of long-range shooting technology. She inspected them methodically, noting the subtle modifications made to each. The M2010 Enhanced Sniper Rifle had been customized with a match-grade barrel and specialized trigger assembly. The Chaytak Intervention M200 featured an advanced recoil suppression system. The third weapon, a prototype without military designation, incorporated experimental technologies not yet available to conventional forces. As she completed her inspection, Maya detected a subtle anomaly in the custom rifle's scope mounting. To an untrained eye, it would appear perfectly aligned, but Maya recognized the deliberate sabotage. The mount had been adjusted to introduce a minute deviation that would increase with distance, ensuring a miss at the extreme range of today's attempt. Finding everything in order, Maya controlled her reaction, turning calmly to face Dr. Harris as he approached. His thin smile suggested he already knew what she had discovered. Almost, she replied evenly. There seems to be a slight misalignment in this mounting system. Harris studied her with clinical interest. Most qualified military snipers wouldn't have noticed that subtle a deviation. Your father had the same extraordinary perception for mechanical tolerances. The observation confirmed Maya's suspicion the sabotage had been intentional, a test within the test. Harris wanted to evaluate not just her shooting ability, but her perception of details others would miss. I'll need some tools to correct this, Maya said, maintaining her composure. Of course, Harris gestured to a technician. Provide Ms. Johnson with whatever she requires. As Maya worked to correct the scope mounting the observation area, filled with spectators, Military officers in formal uniforms stood in small groups discussing the unprecedented nature of the attempt. Scientific personnel established monitoring equipment to record environmental conditions and bullet trajectory. Across the vast distance, a team had positioned specialized cameras around the target area to document the impact from multiple angles. Among the gathering crowd, Maya noted Captain Reed's arrival. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, an unspoken communication passing between them. Reed had changed in the days since their first confrontation in the armory. His initial suspicion transformed into something approaching respect, perhaps even protectiveness. Reed made his way to the firing platform, outwardly casual but with purpose in his movement. As he reached Maya, he spoke quietly while appearing to examine one of the rifles. "Coleman's on his way. We've decoded more of the USB contents." His voice dropped further. "Your father documented every operation under Project Athena, including targets Harris claimed were terrorist leaders who turned out to be political dissidents." Maya nodded almost imperceptibly while continuing her adjustments. "Harris has already tried to sabotage this attempt. The scope mounting was deliberately misaligned." "There's more," Reed continued. "The USB contains coordinates for a dead drop location. We think your father left physical evidence there as insurance, possibly documentation that goes beyond what's on the drive." Before Maya could respond, Martinez approached, his expression conveying warning. Harris was moving toward them, accompanied by two men whose civilian clothing couldn't disguise their military bearing. "Captain Reed," Harris acknowledged with professional courtesy that didn't reach his eyes. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us today." "Supporting a fellow soldier," Reed replied smoothly. "Ms. Johnson may be a civilian contractor now, but her father was one of our finest. Seems appropriate to have Special Forces representation at this demonstration." Harris's smile thinned. "Indeed, though this is primarily a scientific documentation rather than a military exercise." He turned to Maya. "We should proceed soon. Weather conditions are optimal now, but forecasts suggest increasing winds within the hour." Maya completed her corrections to the scope, mounting her movements precise and unhurried despite the pressure. She had performed under more challenging conditions during her father's training, including sessions where he had deliberately introduced mechanical failures she needed to identify and correct before completing difficult shots. As the final preparations were made, Colonel Coleman arrived with an air of authority that parted the gathered observers. His silver hair caught the morning sun, his uniform immaculate, despite what must have been a rushed journey from Washington. Harris's expression flickered with momentary surprise before returning to calculated neutrality. "Colonel," he acknowledged, "I understood you were detained in Washington for budget appropriations." "Some priorities transcend budget meetings," Coleman replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. "A shot at 3,800 meters qualifies." He turned to Maya with professional courtesy. "Ms. Johnson, are you satisfied with the equipment?" "I am now, sir." She answered, the emphasis subtle but unmistakable. Coleman nodded understanding, passing between them. "Then perhaps we should proceed." With the principal players assembled, Maya took her position behind the custom rifle. She had selected it deliberately, the most advanced of the three options, but also the one Harris had attempted to sabotage. Using it successfully would send a clear message about her capabilities and awareness. The range officer announced the official parameters of the attempt: target distance 3,800 meters, current wind conditions 3 to 5 miles per hour, variable direction, temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit, barometric pressure 30.112 inches mercury, relative humidity 42%. For most military snipers, these would be merely the starting points for complex calculations using ballistic tables or computer assistance. For Maya, they formed a multidimensional model in her mind, a lived understanding of how these factors would interact across the bullet's 4-second journey. As she settled into position, another memory surfaced, perhaps the most important lesson her father had ever shared. She was 18, preparing for a difficult shot during one of their final training sessions before she left for college. "Maya," David had said, his voice serious even for him, "there's something you need to understand about this skill we share." She had looked up from the rifle, struck by his tone. "The government calls it a gift and advantage. They'll tell you it makes you special, valuable." His eyes had held a weight beyond their usual intensity. "But it's also a burden, because once they know what you can do, they'll never stop trying to use you." "Is that what happened to you?" she had asked, finally, voicing the question that had lingered between them for years. "I made choices," he had answered after a long pause. "Some I'm proud of. Others keep me awake at night." He had placed his hand on the rifle. "This is just a tool, Maya. The moral weight comes from how you choose to use it. Never let anyone take that choice from you." The memory dissolved as Maya completed her preparations. The gathered observers had fallen silent, aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Through the scope, the target appeared as little more than a speck. At the extreme distance, a standard military silhouette, specially reinforced with electronic sensors to register the impact. Maya made final adjustments based on her environmental reading rather than the digital displays that technicians had set up nearby. The scope settings now reflected calculations that went beyond conventional ballistics, incorporating variables her father had identified as critical at extreme distances, but that military doctrine had never formally recognized. Harris watched with undisguised fascination, documenting her every adjustment. To him, Maya represented the validation of theories he had pursued for decades, proof that the abilities he had studied in her father could be passed down, refined, perhaps even enhanced. As Maya established her breathing rhythm, the world around her seemed to recede. The murmurs of observers, the electronic hum of monitoring equipment, even her own physical sensations all faded into background awareness as she entered the state of focused consciousness her father had taught her. Not meditation exactly, but a heightened perception where mind and body functioned as a single integrated system rather than separate entities. In this state, Maya didn't just calculate the bullet's path, she experienced it, feeling, rather than thinking through the complex interplay of forces that would guide the projectile to its target. Gravity, wind resistance, spin drift, Coriolis effect, atmospheric density layers all became intuitive rather than mathematical. Her finger found the trigger with the same naturalness as taking a breath. The pressure increased gradually, a perfect application of force that would break the firing pin's resistance without disturbing the rifle's alignment. The shot, when it came, seemed almost incidental after such complete preparation, the rifle's report echoing across the range as the bullet began its long journey through space and time. For the nearly 4 seconds of flight time, Maya maintained perfect position, tracking through the scope as the bullet traveled across an impossible distance. Through specialized observation equipment, the gathered witnesses followed the bullet's vapor trail as it curved through the morning air, arcing high to counteract gravity before descending toward the distant target. The silence was absolute, every observer holding their breath as the projectile completed its journey. The impact registered simultaneously on multiple monitoring systems, electronic sensors, confirming what the high-powered spotting scopes revealed: a perfect center mass hit at 3,800 meters a distance beyond what most military experts considered possible for consistent accuracy. The range erupted in controlled excitement, military personnel exchanging glances of professional appreciation, scientists reviewing data with growing excitement. technicians confirming what instruments had recorded. A shot that should have been mathematically improbable, if not impossible, executed with the casual precision of absolute mastery. Maya rose from the firing position with the fluid economy of movement that characterized everything she did. Her expression revealed nothing of the significance of what she had just accomplished, a shot that extended the boundaries of known marksmanship, that validated her father's legacy, that confirmed everything Harris had suspected about her abilities. Harris approached with barely contained excitement, scientific objectivity temporarily overcome by the validation of decades of research. "Extraordinary," he said, reviewing the data streaming to his tablet. "Better results than even your father achieved under controlled conditions. The deviation from point of aim was less than 3 centimeters at nearly 4 kilometers. Maya met his gaze steadily. "My father could have made that shot. He chose not to demonstrate the full extent of his abilities to your program." A flicker of annoyance crossed Harris's features before his scientific enthusiasm reasserted itself. "Perhaps, but you've confirmed what we've long theorized, that these extraordinary processing capabilities can be inherited, perhaps even enhanced in subsequent generations." He gestured to his assistants, who began packing equipment with practiced efficiency. "We'll continue this discussion at our research facility. Transport is already arranged." "That won't be necessary, Dr. Harris." Colonel Coleman's voice cut through the congratulatory atmosphere, his authority evident in every syllable. He approached with Reed and Martinez flanking him, their postures suggesting more than casual support. "Ms. Johnson's demonstration is complete," Coleman continued. "As agreed, she has fulfilled her obligation to your program." Harris's expression hardened, the scientific facade giving way to something colder and more calculated. "Colonel, this matter falls under Presidential Finding 13-27. Ms. Johnson's abilities represent a national security asset that requires proper management and development." "I'm well aware of the finding," Coleman replied evenly. "I'm also aware of Executive Order 1-333, which prohibits assassination of foreign nationals except under specific presidential authorization, and the constitutional protections against targeting American citizens." He held up a secure digital tablet. "Protections that Project Athena appears to have violated repeatedly, according to documents we've recently reviewed." The implication hung in the air between them. Coleman had accessed the evidence David Johnson had secured before his death, the documentation of operations that had crossed legal and ethical boundaries under Harris's direction. Harris's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A recalculation of possibilities, an assessment of new variables. "Those documents are classified at the highest level. Accessing them without proper authorization constitutes a federal offense, as does using government resources for unauthorized eliminations," Coleman countered, "particularly when those eliminations target American citizens exercising their constitutional rights." And the standoff between them represented more than a personal confrontation. It was the collision of institutional forces, the visible manifestation of a shadow war that had been fought within government agencies for decades. Harris represented programs that operated beyond oversight, that viewed constitutional protections as inconvenient obstacles to national security. Coleman embodied the military tradition that placed duty to the Constitution above all other considerations. Maya watched the exchange with outward calm, though her mind was processing tactical options should the situation deteriorate. Her position on the firing platform gave her advantageous sightlines. Reed and Martinez had positioned themselves strategically, their training evident in their seemingly casual stances. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately," Harris suggested, his tone modulating from confrontational to diplomatic. "I believe Ms. Johnson deserves to hear the full truth," Coleman replied, "about her father's work with your program, and about what really drove him to leave it. With that, Coleman handed Maya the secure tablet he had been holding. On the screen was a classified file that had been unlocked using decryption keys from her father's USB drive. The document detailed an operation codenamed Broken Arrow, the elimination of an American journalist who had been investigating black budget programs, including Project Athena. "Your father was told this target was a terrorist financier," Coleman explained quietly. "When he discovered the truth, he confronted Harris. That confrontation led to his separation from the program under terms he negotiated using evidence he had gathered about unauthorized operations." Maya scanned the document pieces of her father's past falling into place. His insistence on teaching her not just shooting skills, but counter-surveillance techniques. His warnings about men who would come for her someday. His deathbed plea that she make different choices than he had. "You used my father as an assassin," Maya said, looking up at Harris, "then lied to him about who he was killing." Harris's expression remained impassive. "Your father was a soldier who understood that national security sometimes requires difficult actions. Only later did he develop ethical concerns that compromised his effectiveness." "You mean his conscience?" Maya corrected, her voice steady despite the anger building within her. "He discovered you were using him to eliminate political obstacles, not legitimate threats." "The distinction is rarely as clear as civilians imagine," Harris replied. "Threats to national security take many forms. Your father's extraordinary abilities provided surgical precision that prevented broader conflict and collateral damage. The justification was delivered with practiced conviction, the same reasoning that had been used to authorize countless covert operations throughout the Cold War and beyond. The language of necessity, of lesser evils, of hard choices, made for the greater good. "What exactly do you want from me?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. "To continue your father's work," Harris said without hesitation, "but with proper guidance and oversight. Your abilities represent a national asset that could save countless American lives by eliminating threats before they materialize. And if these threats turn out to be journalists or political activists, American citizens exercising constitutional rights," Maya challenged. Harris spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. "Those were exceptional circumstances during a different era. Today's operations have robust legal review and authorization protocols." The lie was delivered with such conviction that it might have been convincing to someone who hadn't seen the evidence on the tablet operations authorized within the past year, targeting individuals whose threat to national security appeared to be their knowledge of classified programs rather than any violent intent. "I decline your offer, Dr. Harris," Maya said so simply. Harris's expression hardened again. "Ms. Johnson, I don't think you understand. This isn't an ordinary job offer that you can simply decline. Presidential Finding 13-27 classifies your abilities as a national security asset. That asset will be secured and utilized appropriately." The threat was explicit, now cooperation or coercion. Maya had expected nothing less, having been raised by a father who understood the shadows within his own government. "I believe Ms. Johnson understands perfectly," Coleman interjected. "She's declining to participate in a program that has repeatedly exceeded its legal authorization and violated constitutional protections, a program that her father documented extensively before his death." Harris turned to Coleman with cold assessment. "Colonel, your distinguished service record won't protect you if you interfere with a classified national security program. Neither will it shield Captain Reed or Sergeant Martinez from the consequences of their actions." "Perhaps not," Coleman acknowledged, "but I suspect the Senate Intelligence Committee might take an interest in the full operational history of Project Athena particularly the domestic operations conducted without proper legal authorization. The implied threat hung between them mutually assured destruction. Harris could damage the careers of military personnel who interfered with his program, but exposure of Athena's unauthorized operations would destroy not just the program, but potentially the careers and freedom of those who had authorized its more questionable activities. Harris studied Coleman with clinical detachment, recalculating his position. "What exactly are you proposing, Colonel?" "Terms similar to those David Johnson negotiated," Coleman replied. "Ms. Johnson continues her civilian work without interference from your agency. Any consultation she provides to military programs comes through official channels with full transparency regarding objectives and targets." "Unacceptable from a security standpoint," Harris dismissed. "Her abilities represent a capability that requires proper control and utilization." "My abilities belong to me," Maya interjected, her voice quiet but firm. "Not to you, not to the government, not to anyone. My father made sure I understood that distinction." Harris turned to her scientific fascination, briefly overriding his operational focus. "You truly don't understand what you are. Do you? The neurological processing capabilities you and your father share occur in perhaps 1 in 20 million individuals. Your ability to perceive and calculate variables simultaneously, to integrate sensory information at rates that exceed normal human capacity. These aren't just skills, Ms. Johnson. They're evolutionary advantages that my program has spent decades identifying and developing." "For assassination," Maya stated bluntly. "For precision elimination of threats to national security," Harris corrected. "A capability that prevents conventional military action and the collateral damage that comes with it. One bullet instead of an airstrike. One death instead of dozens." The argument was seductive in its utilitarian appeal, the same reasoning that had likely convinced her father initially. Maya understood its power, the patriotic appeal of using exceptional abilities to protect American interests and potentially save lives. She also understood, as her father eventually had, the moral hazard of such power without proper oversight or constitutional constraints. "My answer remains the same," she said. Harris's expression hardened into something closer to his true nature. Cold, calculating, accustomed to overcoming obstacles through whatever means necessary. "Then you leave me no choice but to exercise the authority granted under Presidential Finding 13-27. He nodded to his assistants, who moved with practiced efficiency toward pre-established positions. The confrontation was escalating toward a potential flashpoint with Maya at its center. Before the situation could deteriorate further, Reed stepped forward, positioning himself beside Maya. "Dr. Harris, before you take any action, you should know that Lieutenant General Harmon has been fully briefed on this situation." The introduction of a 3-star general's name into the confrontation caused Harris to pause, recalculating once again. "General Harmon has no operational authority over my program," he stated, though with less certainty than before. "Perhaps not," Martinez added, joining the conversation. "But as Deputy Commander of Joint Special Operations Command, he does have the ear of the National Security Council. I believe he's briefing them as we speak, using materials provided from David Johnson's archives." The coordinated response revealed careful planning by Coleman, Reed, and Martinez, a multi-layered strategy to neutralize Harris's institutional advantage through parallel pressure at higher levels of government. Harris's expression revealed nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. He was reassessing in real time, calculating new probabilities based on unexpected variables. "There's another option," Maya offered into the tense silence, "one that serves both national security and constitutional principles." All eyes turned to her. "I'll establish a training program for military snipers," she continued. sharing the techniques and understanding my father developed, but applied to legitimate military operations with proper oversight and authorization. No black operations, no assassinations disguised as counterterrorism, no targeting of American citizens. The proposal hung in the air, a compromise that would preserve the capabilities Harris valued while placing them within proper constitutional and ethical frameworks. The techniques without the handler, Coleman observed with approval. The capability within proper chains of command and oversight. Harris considered this his expression unreadable. Such an arrangement would require certain guarantees, security protocols, operational parameters, defined areas of application. All subject to normal military oversight and legal review, Maya countered. No presidential findings that bypass constitutional protections. No classifying American citizens as national security threats to justify extrajudicial action against them. The negotiation had shifted from confrontation to conditional collaboration, Harris recognizing that his optimal outcome was no longer achievable, Maya establishing boundaries that would prevent misuse of the knowledge she would share. This will require further discussion at higher levels, Harris finally said, neither accepting nor rejecting the proposal outright. In the meantime, I expect all materials related to Project Athena to remain secured and classified. Agreed, Coleman replied, with the understanding that those materials remain accessible as insurance against any attempt to circumvent today's arrangement. The mutual understanding was clear détente maintained through balanced leverage. Harris would accept limitations on his program's access to Maya's abilities. Coleman and his allies would not expose the program's past excesses unless provoked. As Harris and his team departed, Maya felt a weight lifting not completely, but significantly. The confrontation she had feared since discovering her father's hidden legacy had reached a resolution, if not a complete victory. That was well handled, Coleman said quietly. Your father would be proud. Maya nodded thoughts, turning to the man who had prepared her for this moment through years of patient teaching. Not just marksmanship, but judgment. Not just skill, but the wisdom to know when and how to use it. What happens now? She asked. Now we formalize the arrangement, Coleman replied. Establish the training program under proper military oversight. Share your father's techniques with snipers who will use them according to lawful orders and constitutional principles. Reed approached professional respect evident in his bearing. For what it's worth, I'd be honored to help establish that program. What you demonstrated today goes beyond anything in current military doctrine. Maya considered the offer, sensing the shift in their relationship from suspicion to genuine respect. I'd appreciate that, Captain. As the gathered observers began to disperse, Maya took a final look at the distant target 800 meters away, marked by her perfect shot. The achievement represented more than technical mastery. It symbolized her reclamation of her father's legacy, transforming what had been used as a weapon into a gift that could be shared on her own terms. 3 months later, Maya stood before a class of 12 military snipers in a specialized training facility at Fort Bragg. The men and women before her represented the elite of America's military sharpshooters, experienced operators selected for their demonstrated abilities and psychological stability. Conventional sniper doctrine teaches that consistent accuracy beyond 1/500 meters is mathematically improbable. She began, her voice carrying the quiet authority of absolute mastery. Today, we're going to re-examine that assumption by understanding how environmental variables interact across extreme distances. At the back of the classroom, Captain Reed observed with professional appreciation. Their working relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship, mutual respect, forged through shared purpose and complementary skills. Reed brought military doctrine and tactical experience. Maya contributed insights and techniques that transcended conventional training. The program they had established operated under clear parameters, focused on military applications in declared combat zones, subject to normal chains of command and legal review, with no connection to the shadow operations that had characterized Project Athena. Dr. Harris had retreated to the bureaucratic shadows, his program still operational, but with reduced scope and increased oversight. The delicate balance of mutual deterrence held Coleman maintaining custody of David Johnson's documented evidence, Harris accepting limitations on his operational freedom. After the day's training concluded, Maya returned to her new office, a space that reflected her unique position as civilian consultant to military special operations. The walls held framed photographs of Montana landscapes, where she had trained with her father, alongside technical diagrams of ballistic trajectories and wind effects. On her desk stood the photograph that mattered most. David Johnson, in his prime, standing beside a younger Coleman, during desert training, his rare smile captured in a moment of genuine pride. Beside it lay his journal, now supplemented with Maya's own observations and refinements. Reed appeared in the doorway, respecting the boundary with a light knock. "The students are impressed, particularly Martinez's protege. He managed one over 800 meters today using your techniques." Maya nodded with quiet satisfaction. "He has the gift. Not to the same degree as my father or me, but it's there. With proper development, he could extend to 2,200, maybe further." Reed entered, closing the door to ensure privacy. Harris was observed at the Pentagon yesterday, meeting with the Undersecretary for Special Programs. The information wasn't surprising. Harris would never abandon his pursuit of enhanced human capabilities for national security applications. The game between them would continue, a chess match played in institutional shadows. "Any indication of his intentions?" Maya asked. "Nothing specific. Coleman's contacts suggest he's pursuing a different angle, cognitive enhancement, through technological interfaces rather than innate abilities." Maya absorbed this, calculating implications, moving from identifying natural abilities to manufacturing artificial ones, consistent with his philosophical approach. Reed nodded agreement. The fundamental question remains unchanged: capabilities without ethical frameworks, power without constitutional constraints. The observation revealed how far Reed had come from their first encounter, from suspicion of Maya's abilities to understanding of the deeper issues at stake. The question wasn't whether exceptional capabilities should exist, but how they should be governed and applied. "I'm heading to Montana next week," Maya said, changing the subject. "My father's property needs attention." Reed understood the significance, the remote Montana land where David Johnson had trained his daughter, away from prying eyes. "Will you be back for the advanced course starting next month?" "I will," Maya confirmed. "There's something I need to retrieve first." The statement carried weight beyond its simple meaning, a reference to the dead drop location identified in her father's encrypted files. Whatever final insurance policy David Johnson had left remained unclaimed, waiting for his daughter to complete the legacy he had entrusted to her. The Montana landscape stretched before Maya in autumn glory, golden aspen stands contrasting against the deep green of pine forests, distant mountains already capped with early snow. The family property remained, as she remembered, 200 acres of wilderness backing against national forest land, isolated from neighbors and curious eyes. The cabin stood weathered, but sound, maintained by a local caretaker during Maya's absence. Inside, memories waited in every corner, her father cleaning rifles, at the scarred oak table teaching her mathematics, by calculating bullet trajectories, preparing her for a future he sensed would require extraordinary abilities. Maya moved with purpose to the location described in the encrypted files, a rock formation on the property's northern boundary marked by a distinctive lightning-scarred pine. The cache was expertly hidden, the disturbance in the soil invisible to anyone who hadn't been specifically directed to it. The waterproof case she unearthed contained what she had expected: physical documentation her father had secured as final insurance against those who had used him. Photographs, operational orders, target assessments, and most significantly, a handwritten journal documenting David Johnson's growing realization of how his extraordinary abilities had been misdirected. The evidence was more personal than the encrypted files, not just operational details, but her father's moral struggle as he discovered the true nature of assignments he had been given. Targets identified as terrorist threats, who were actually political dissidents. Security risks, who were journalists investigating government overreach. American citizens classified as threats based on their opposition to classified programs. Among the documents lay a sealed envelope addressed simply, Maya. Inside, a letter written in her father's distinctive hand during his final months as cancer claimed his strength, but not his determination. Maya, it began. If you're reading this, then the men I warned you about have found you. They've recognized in you the same abilities they used in me. They've offered you purpose, resources, the chance to serve your country in ways few can. The offer is seductive. It appeals to patriotism, to the desire to use exceptional abilities for meaningful purpose. I accepted it once, believing I was protecting American lives by eliminating genuine threats. What I discovered too late was the absence of oversight, the classification of inconvenient truth as national security threat, the gradual erosion of constitutional principles in the name of necessary action. The gift we share comes with responsibility, Maya. The ability to extend impact across impossible distances carries moral weight that transcends institutional authority or patriotic appeal. I taught you these skills not so you could follow my path, but so you could choose your own with full awareness of the consequences. Not so you could become a weapon aimed by others, but so you could protect yourself from those who would use you as they used me. Whatever choice you make, remember the skill itself is neutral. The moral weight comes from how you choose to apply it, and whether that choice is truly yours. With love and faith in your judgment, Dad. Maya folded the letter, carefully returning it to its envelope. Her father had anticipated this moment years before it arrived, preparing her not just with skills, but with the wisdom to apply them according to her own moral compass, rather than institutional direction. Standing in the fading Montana light, Maya felt a sense of completion, not of her journey, but of her understanding of what had come before. David Johnson had not just been an exceptional shooter. He had been a man who discovered the courage to question his role in operations that violated the principles he had sworn to defend. His legacy wasn't just the extraordinary abilities he had passed to his daughter, but the moral framework he had provided for their application. Not unquestioning patriotism, but thoughtful citizenship. Not blind obedience to authority, but commitment to constitutional principles. 1 year after the demonstration at Fort Bragg, Maya stood beside her father's grave in the small Montana cemetery where he had been laid to rest. The simple headstone bore his name, rank, and dates, but not the classified operations that had defined much of his service. Those remained in shadows known only to those with proper clearance and need to know. Maya placed a single bullet on the headstone, a custom round with 3,800 engraved on its casing. The distance she had matched and slightly exceeded her father's longest confirmed shot, honoring his legacy while establishing her own path. "I understand now, Dad," she said softly to the silent stone. "Why you taught me what you did. Why you warned me about the men who would come. I've made my choice, not the one they wanted, but the one you prepared me for." The training program she had established at Fort Bragg had expanded, incorporating her father's techniques into conventional military doctrine. Dozens of snipers now applied principles once considered theoretical, extending effective ranges and saving American lives in combat operations around the world. Dr. Harris remained a presence in the shadows, occasionally testing boundaries, probing for weaknesses, never abandoning his pursuit of enhanced human capabilities for national security applications. The chess game between them continued mutual deterrence, maintaining an uneasy balance. Captain Reed had become a trusted ally and friend, his initial suspicion transformed into respect and eventually genuine connection. Their complementary strengths, her extraordinary abilities, his tactical experience, and military credibility created a partnership that transcended professional collaboration. As Maya turned to leave the cemetery, she noticed a black sedan parked at the distant entrance, its occupant watching through binoculars. The surveillance was neither surprising nor concerning part of the ongoing dance between competing interests within her own government. The watcher would observe her visiting her father's grave, then driving to town for supplies, then returning to the family property. What they wouldn't see was the secure satellite communication she maintained with Coleman, or the updated insurance files she had distributed to trusted associates, or the continual refinement of her contingency plans. David Johnson had taught his daughter more than marksmanship. He had taught her to anticipate moves before they were made, to prepare for scenarios others couldn't imagine, to maintain awareness of the larger game beyond immediate circumstances. Maya walked to her truck with unhurried confidence, a woman who had found her place in a complex world, not as a weapon to be aimed by others, but as a guardian of principles larger than any individual or institution. Not running from her father's legacy, but transforming it into something that honored his final understanding rather than his initial service. From a distant ridge overlooking the cemetery, Dr. Harris lowered his own specialized binoculars. Beside him, a younger colleague waited for assessment. "She's even more remarkable than her father," Harris observed. "Not just the physical abilities, but the strategic thinking. David Johnson was a weapon. His daughter is something more complex." "Do we proceed with the contingency plan?" the colleague asked. Harris considered this, weighing variables with the clinical detachment that characterized his approach to even the most human situations. "Not yet. The balance of deterrence remains effective. She has her father's evidence. We have institutional authority. Mutual assured destruction maintains equilibrium. And the training program she's established? An acceptable compromise for now," Harris replied. "The capabilities are being developed and documented, even if not under our direct control. When circumstances change, we'll reassess." As Harris and his colleague departed, the Montana landscape continued its timeless cycle, seasons, changing rivers, flowing mountains, standing witness to the small dramas of human ambition and conscience. Somewhere within that vast wilderness, a woman with extraordinary abilities continued her father's legacy while charting her own course. Maya Johnson had fulfilled her father's hope, not by following his path, but by understanding it fully enough to choose her own. Not by rejecting the extraordinary abilities she had inherited, but by applying them according to principles that transcended institutional direction or expedient necessity. The ghost shooter's legacy lived on not as a weapon in the shadows, but as a light illuminating a better path forward.